The blood on Zelda Jennings's hands had dried 3 days ago, but she could still see it staining her skin like a phantom mark that soap and creek water could never wash away. She rode into Loveland, Colorado on a stolen horse in the spring of 1878. Her dark hair tangled with dust, and her green eyes hollow from sleepless nights spent looking over her shoulder. The mountain town sat nestled against the Rockies, and though the air smelled of pine and fresh possibility, Zelda knew she carried death with her like a second shadow. She had killed a man in Denver. Not just any man, but Samuel Richter, the youngest son of one of the wealthiest cattle barons in Colorado Territory. The newspapers had called it cold-blooded murder. They said she lured him to her room above the saloon where she worked, took his money, and put a bullet in his chest while he slept. What they did not print was how Samuel Richter had beaten 3 women before her, how he had broken the jaw of a girl barely 18, how he had come to Zelda's room with violence in his eyes and whiskey on his breath. What they did not print was that she had fought for her life, that the gun had been his own, that his hands had been around her throat when she finally managed to pull the trigger. But the truth did not matter to men like his father. Marcus Richter had money enough to buy judges and lawmen, to put a price on her head that would make even honest men consider betrayal. So Zelda ran, stealing a horse in the dead of night and riding hard toward the mountains, hoping distance and altitude might buy her a chance at survival. Loveland was smaller than she had hoped, just a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church at one end and a saloon at the other. The kind of place where strangers were noticed and secrets were hard to keep. She should have kept riding, pushed on toward Wyoming or further into the mountain mining camps where a woman could disappear into the crowds of fortune seekers. But her horse was lame, her money was gone, and her body ached with exhaustion that went bone deep. She tied the horse outside the general store and stepped inside, keeping her head down. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles and suspicious eyes, watched her browse the sparse shelves. She had nothing to trade, nothing to offer except the silver locket around her neck that had belonged to her mother. Her fingers touched it through her shirt, and she felt the familiar shape of the only thing she had left from a life before survival became her only concern. "Can I help you, miss?" the proprietor asked, his tone suggesting he would rather she left. "Just looking," Zelda said quietly, moving toward the door. She would have to find work, though what kind of work a woman with no references and a murder charge hanging over her head could find, she did not know. The saloon would be the obvious choice, but saloon girls were visible, memorable. She needed to be neither. She was untying her horse when she heard the voice behind her. "That animal is favoring his left front leg pretty badly." Zelda turned to find a man standing a few feet away, his hands resting easy on his belt, his hat tipped back enough to show a face that was sun-weathered and honest. He was tall, broad-shouldered in the way of men who worked with their hands, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and blue eyes that studied her horse with genuine concern rather than judgment. "I know," Zelda said carefully. "I will rest him before moving on." "Moving on to where?" the man asked, and there was something in his voice that was not quite suspicion, but not quite friendliness either, wariness perhaps, the same wariness she felt toward everyone now. "North," she said vaguely. He nodded slowly, his eyes moving from the horse to her face, taking in details she wished she could hide. The shadows under her eyes, the tear in her sleeve, the way she held herself like someone ready to run or fight. "My name is Daniel Carter," he said after a moment. "I run a horse ranch about 5 miles outside town. That animal needs proper rest and care, or he will end up permanently lame. You are welcome to board him at my place for a few days." Zelda's first instinct was to refuse. Accepting help meant creating connections, and connections meant vulnerability. But her horse would not make it another day of hard riding, and without the horse, she was as good as caught. "I do not have money to pay you," she said bluntly. "Did not ask for money," Daniel said. "Asked if you wanted to give your horse a chance to heal." She studied him, looking for the angle, the trap, the ulterior motive. Men did not offer help to strange women without expecting something in return. She had learned that lesson too many times to count. But his eyes were steady, and something in his face reminded her of her brother, who had died of fever when they were children. That same straightforward honesty that had no room for deception. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the mountains. "My sister ran away from a bad situation a few years back," he said finally. "She did not make it far enough. Maybe if someone had helped her when she needed it, things would have turned out different." He looked back at Zelda. "So I help when I can. No strings, no expectations, just help." Zelda felt something crack in her chest, some small piece of the armor she had built around herself. She wanted to trust him. God, she wanted to trust someone, but trust had nearly gotten her killed more times than she could count. "All right," she heard herself say, "just until the horses sound." Daniel nodded and gestured toward the end of the street. "My wagon is over by the feed store. We can load your horse in the back, save him the walk." As they made their way through town, Zelda was acutely aware of eyes on her. A woman standing outside the dress shop, watching with narrow curiosity. Two men outside the saloon, their conversation stopping as she passed. A child pointing before his mother pulled his hand down and hurried him along. She felt exposed, visible in all the ways she could not afford to be. Daniel's wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, pulled by two draft horses that looked healthy and calm. He lowered the back gate and helped Zelda coax her lame horse into the bed with a gentleness that surprised her. Most men she knew treated animals as tools, useful only as long as they served a purpose. Daniel talked to the injured horse in a low, soothing voice, running his hands over the swollen leg with practiced care. "Looks like an abscess, huh?" he said. "Painful, but treatable. He will be fine in a week or two." Zelda climbed onto the wagon seat, her carpet bag clutched in her lap. It held everything she owned now. 2 dresses, a change of underclothes, the gun she had used to kill Samuel Richter. She kept her hand near the opening, her fingers close to the weapon, just in case. Daniel took the reins and guided the team out of town, heading west toward the foothills. The road was rough, rutted from spring rains, and the wagon jolted over stones and through puddles. Neither of them spoke. Zelda kept her eyes on the landscape, watching for riders, for pauses, for any sign that her past had caught up with her present. The ranch appeared as they crested a low hill, a collection of buildings spread across a valley with mountain peaks rising behind them like sentinels. There was a main house built of logs and river stone, a large barn, several corrals, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Horses grazed in the pastures, dozens of them in various colors and sizes. It was beautiful, in a way that made Zelda's throat tight. The kind of place she had dreamed about as a child, before life taught her that dreams were for people who could afford them. "It is not much," Daniel said, though there was pride in his voice, "but it is mine. Built it with my father before he passed. Now it is just me and 2 ranch hands, Tom and Wesley. Good men. They keep to themselves mostly." He drove the wagon to the barn and helped Zelda unload her horse, settling the animal in a clean stall with fresh water and hay. His movements were efficient, confident, the actions of a man who had done this work 1,000 times. Zelda watched him work, trying to reconcile his kindness with every lesson she had learned about men and their motivations. "There is a room in the main house," Daniel said, closing the stall door. "Used to be my sister's. You can stay there while your horse heals. No charge, like I said. I will ask that you help with cooking and cleaning if you are able. My housekeeper passed on this winter, and I have been managing poorly on my own." "I can cook," Zelda said. It was one of the few useful skills she had learned from her mother before everything fell apart. "And clean. I will earn my keep." Daniel smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger and less weathered. "Fair enough. Come on, I will show you the house." The interior was simple but comfortable, with furniture that looked handmade and sturdy. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast iron stove, and 2 bedrooms off a short hallway. Daniel opened the door to the smaller bedroom, revealing a space with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "It is not fancy," he said, "but the roof does not leak and the bed is comfortable." "It is perfect," Zelda said, and meant it. After weeks of sleeping on the ground or in haylofts, a real bed with a real roof felt like luxury beyond measure. Daniel left her to settle in, saying he needed to check on the other horses before supper. Zelda closed the door and sat on the bed, her carpet bag beside her. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to let her shoulders drop from their defensive hunch. She was not safe, not really. She would never be safe as long as Marcus Richter wanted her dead, but for this moment in this room she could pretend. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses on pegs by the door, and placing her underclothes in the dresser. The gun she wrapped in a cloth and tucked under her pillow. Then she lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the ranch outside. Horses nickering, birds calling, the distant sound of Daniel's voice talking to someone. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds, the kind of sounds that belonged to a different life than the one she had been living. She must have dozed because the next thing she knew, someone was knocking on her door. She sat up quickly, her hand going automatically to the gun under her pillow. "Miss, supper is ready if you're hungry," Daniel's voice called through the door. Zelda's stomach answered before she could, growling loudly enough that she was certain he heard it. She had not eaten since yesterday morning, and then only a handful of dried corn she had found in an abandoned cabin. "I will be right there," she called back, smoothing her hair and splashing water on her face from the basin on the dresser. The kitchen table was set for one, and Daniel was dishing stew from a pot on the stove. The smell made Zelda's mouth water and her knees weak. "Sit," Daniel said, gesturing to the table. "I already ate with Tom and Wesley in the bunkhouse. This is for you." "You are not eating?" Zelda asked, suspicious again. "Already did," he repeated patiently. "I figured you might be more comfortable eating alone. New place, strange people." "I remember how my sister was when she first came back from—" He trailed off, his expression darkening. "Well, just eat. There is bread in the basket and butter if you want it." He left before she could respond, the door closing softly behind him. Zelda stared at the food, at the generous portion of stew rich with meat and vegetables, at the thick slices of bread that were still warm. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Kindness was more dangerous than cruelty because it made you hope, and hope was the surest path to disappointment. But she was hungry, desperately so, and the food was there. She ate slowly at first, then faster, hardly tasting it as she shoveled it into her mouth. When the bowl was empty, she used the bread to soak up every drop of broth, then sat back with her hand on her stomach, feeling fuller than she had in weeks. She washed the dishes in the basin, tidied the kitchen, and went back to her room. Through the window, she could see Daniel in one of the corrals, working with a young horse on a long lead line. His movements were patient, calm, never rushed or harsh. The horse, skittish at first, gradually began to relax, to respond to his cues. Zelda watched until the sun set and darkness made it impossible to see. Then she undressed and climbed into bed. She did not expect to sleep, but exhaustion finally overcame vigilance, and she sank into dreams that were dark and bloody and full of Samuel Richter's face. She woke before dawn to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee. Her body ached from weeks of hard riding, and for a moment she did not remember where she was. Then it came back. Loveland, the ranch, Daniel Carter, and his unexpected kindness. She dressed quickly and went to the kitchen, finding Daniel at the stove frying eggs and bacon. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee is on the table. Help yourself." Zelda poured a cup and sat down, cradling the warmth in her hands. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what she needed. Daniel brought 2 plates to the table and sat across from her, his hair still damp from washing. I need to ride out to check the fence line in the north pasture today, he said, cutting into his eggs. Tom and Wesley will be working with the young stock in the near corral. You are welcome to come with me if you want to see more of the ranch, or you can stay here and do whatever you like. No pressure either way. Zelda considered. Staying at the ranch meant being alone, which had its appeal, but it also meant being isolated if trouble came looking for her. At least with Daniel, she would have warning if riders approached. I will come with you, she said, if you do not mind the company. Would not have offered if I minded, Daniel said simply. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence, then Daniel packed a lunch while Zelda cleaned up the kitchen. An hour later, they were riding out on two of Daniel's horses, heading north across rolling grassland toward the tree line. The morning was cool and clear, and the mountains seemed close enough to touch. Zelda had always loved the high country, the way the air felt cleaner and the sky seemed bigger. It reminded her of the few good memories she had from childhood, before her father left and her mother started drinking and everything turned gray and desperate. How long have you been running? Daniel asked after they had been riding for a while. Zelda tensed, her hand moving instinctively toward the gun at her hip. What makes you think I am running? The way you watch the horizon, the way you sleep with your boots on. I saw them by your bed this morning when I knocked. He glanced at her. The way you look at people like you are expecting them to hurt you. Maybe I have reason to expect that, Zelda said defensively. Maybe you do, Daniel agreed. I am not asking you to tell me your story. That is your business. I am just saying that I know the look of someone running, and I know it does not end well unless you find a reason to stop. And what if I cannot stop? Zelda asked. What if stopping means dying? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the mountains. My sister's name was Margaret, he said finally. She was 2 years younger than me and the kindest person I ever knew. When she was 19, she married a man named Robert Hayes. He seemed decent enough at first, but after the wedding he changed, started drinking, hitting her. She hid it for a year before she finally ran away. She made it as far as Denver before he found her. Zelda's chest tightened. What happened? He beat her so badly she never woke up. She died 3 days later. Daniel's voice was flat, controlled, but she could hear the pain underneath. The law did nothing, said it was a domestic matter, that he was her husband and had rights. He paid a small fine and walked away. He is still alive, probably married to some other poor woman. I am sorry, Zelda said, and meant it. I am telling you this because I learned something from losing Margaret. I learned that running does not always save you, but neither does staying. What saves you is finding people who will stand with you when trouble comes, people who believe your life has value even when the world says it does not. And you think you are one of those people? Zelda asked. I think I would like to be, Daniel said, but that is your choice to make, not mine. They reached the fence line an hour later and found a section where the wire had been cut and the posts knocked over. Daniel dismounted and examined the damage, his expression grim. This was not weather or animals, he said, running his fingers over the clean cuts in the wire. Someone did this deliberately. Who would want to damage your fence? Zelda asked, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. Could be any number of people. I have a neighbor, Graham Foster, who has been trying to buy this land for years. When I refused to sell, he got nasty about it. Or it could be rustlers looking for an easy way to move stolen cattle. Daniel stood up and dusted off his hands. Either way, I need to repair this before I lose horses. They spent the next 3 hours fixing the fence, stretching new wire and resetting posts. It was hard, physical work that left Zelda's hands blistered and her back aching. But there was something satisfying about it too, about creating something solid and useful, about working alongside someone without words or expectations. Daniel moved with the easy efficiency of long practice, and he showed her how to twist the wire tight and brace the posts so they would hold. He treated her like a capable partner rather than a delicate woman who needed protecting, and she found herself relaxing in ways she had not thought possible. When the fence was repaired, they sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree and ate the lunch Daniel had packed. Sandwiches made with thick slices of ham and cheese, apples that were crisp and sweet, and water from a canteen that tasted faintly of metal. "You are good with your hand," Daniel said, watching her examine her blisters. "Most people would have complained about the work." "I have done worse for less reward," Zelda said. "What did you do before you started running?" Daniel asked. "If you do not mind me asking." Zelda considered lying, creating a false history that would make her seem more respectable. But she was tired of lies, tired of pretending to be something she was not. "I worked in a saloon in Denver, serving drinks, entertaining customers, nothing you would consider respectable." She waited for his judgment, for the shift in his expression that would tell her she had just confirmed whatever low opinion he had been forming. But Daniel just nodded, his face unchanged. "My sister worked in a saloon too, after she left her husband. It was the only work she could find that paid enough to live on. She said the work was hard, but the women she worked with were the best friends she ever had." "They were," Zelda said quietly. "They tried to protect me when Samuel Richter came around, but he had money and influence and we had neither." She had not meant to say his name, had not meant to give Daniel any details that could connect her to the murder that had sent her running. But the words came out before she could stop them, pulled out by exhaustion and the strange sense of safety she felt in his presence. If Daniel recognized the name, he did not show it. He just finished his sandwich and stood up, brushing crumbs from his pants. "We should head back. I want to check on your horse's leg and make sure the swelling is going down." They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. More comfortable, less guarded. Zelda found herself watching Daniel when she thought he was not looking, noticing the way he sat his horse with unconscious grace, the way his hands were gentle on the reins. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, all sharp angles and sun-browned skin, but it was his kindness that drew her. That dangerous, tempting kindness that made her want things she had no right to want. Back at the ranch, Daniel checked on her horse while Zelda started preparations for supper. She found chicken in the cold cellar and vegetables in the garden behind the house. She made a roast with potatoes and carrots, biscuits from scratch, and a pie using canned cherries she found in the pantry. It felt good to cook for someone other than herself, to create something that brought pleasure rather than just survival. Daniel came in as she was pulling the pie from the oven, his eyes widening at the spread on the table. "You did not have to go to all this trouble," he said. "You said I should help with cooking," Zelda reminded him. "I am helping." He smiled, that same transforming smile she had seen in town. "Well, I am not complaining. This looks better than anything I've managed in months." They ate together this time, and Daniel told her stories about the ranch, about the horses he had trained and sold, about his plans to expand the herd and maybe start breeding cattle too. He talked about his childhood, about growing up in Missouri before his family moved west after the war. His father had been a Union soldier who wanted a fresh start away from the memories of battle. They had come to Colorado Territory in 1867 when Daniel was 15 and Margaret was 13. They had built the ranch from nothing, working dawn to dusk until they had something worth keeping. "It must be hard running it alone," Zelda said. "Some days more than others," Daniel admitted. "But it is what my father wanted, what Margaret loved. I keep it going for them as much as for myself." After supper, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. Zelda felt something loosen in her chest, some knot of fear and tension that had been pulled tight for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for taking me in, for not asking questions I cannot answer." "Everyone deserves a chance to start over," Daniel said. "Seems to me you have earned yours." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe that redemption was possible, that she could be more than the sum of her worst moments. But she knew better. The world did not forgive women like her, women who killed, even in self-defense, women who worked in saloons and survived however they could. The world had already decided what she was worth, and it was not much. But here, on this porch, with this man who asked for nothing except her company, She could almost imagine a different ending to her story, one where she stayed, where she built something real and lasting, where she learned to live without always looking over her shoulder. The fantasy lasted until the third day when riders came to the ranch. Zelda was hanging laundry when she heard the horses, at least 6 of them, coming fast up the road from town. Her heart seized in her chest, and she dropped the wet shirt she was holding and ran for the house. She had just made it inside and was reaching for her gun when Daniel came through the back door, his face tight with concern. "Get in your room and lock the door," he said. "Do not come out until I tell you it is safe." "Who are they?" Zelda asked, though she thought she already knew. "I do not know yet, but I will find out." He met her eyes, his expression fierce. "I will not let anyone take you. You have my word." She wanted to argue, to tell him not to risk himself for her, but there was no time. The riders were already in the yard. She ran to her room and locked the door, then pressed her ear against the wood, straining to hear what was happening outside. "Afternoon, gentlemen," she heard Daniel say, his voice calm and polite. "What can I do for you?" "We are looking for a woman," a rough voice replied. "Dark hair, green eyes, goes by the name Zelda Jennings. We have reason to believe she might have come through this area." "Lot of women pass through this area," Daniel said. "And can you be more specific?" "She is wanted for murder in Denver. Killed a man in cold blood and stole his money. There is a $500 reward for her capture." The speaker paused. "You would not be hiding a murderer, would you, Carter?" "I would not harbor anyone wanted by the law," Daniel said. And Zelda felt her heart break a little at the lie he told so smoothly. "But I have not seen anyone matching that description. Like I said, a lot of people pass through." There was a long silence, and Zelda could imagine the riders looking around the ranch, searching for signs of her presence. The laundry half hung on the line. The second plate that might still be sitting in the kitchen. Any of 100 small details that could give her away. "Mind if we look around?" the rough voice asked, and it was not really a question. "I mind," Daniel said, and steel had entered his voice. "This is private property. You have no warrant, no authority to search my land, so I will ask you politely to leave." "We could get a warrant," another voice said, younger and more aggressive. "Come back with the sheriff." "You could try," Daniel agreed, "but Sheriff Dalton knows me. Knows I'm not the kind of man to break the law. He would need more than a hunch to search my property. So unless you have something more than suspicion, I suggest you move along." More silence, tension stretching thin as wire. Then the rough voice spoke again. "If you see her, there is good money in turning her in. $500 would go a long way toward fixing that fence someone cut. Think about it, Carter." "I will do that," Daniel said, his tone making it clear he would do nothing of the sort. Zelda heard the horses leaving, the sound of hooves gradually fading. But she did not unlock her door, did not come out until Daniel knocked softly and called her name. "They are gone," he said when she opened the door. His face was drawn, older somehow. "But they will be back, and they will bring the sheriff next time." "I should leave," Zelda said, already moving toward her carpet bag. "I should have left before they came. I have put you in danger." "You are not going anywhere," Daniel said firmly. "Not yet. Not until we figure this out." "Figure what out?" Zelda asked, her voice rising with panic. "I killed a man. That part is true. They have every right to arrest me, to hang me. There is nothing to figure out." "Why did you kill him?" Daniel asked. His eyes locked on hers. And there it was. The question she had been avoiding. The truth she had not spoken aloud to anyone. She could lie, could make up a story that painted her in a better light, but she was tired of lies, and Daniel deserved the truth. "Because he was going to kill me," she said simply. "He came to my room drunk and angry. He said I had embarrassed him, that I needed to be taught respect. He hit me, choked me, and when I fought back, he pulled a gun. We struggled, and I got it away from him. And then I shot him. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew if I did not, I would be the one lying dead on that floor." "Then it was self-defense," Daniel said. "It does not matter what it was," Zelda said bitterly. Samuel Richter was rich and white and male. I am a saloon girl with no family and no money. No court in this territory would believe me over his father's word. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he thought. All right, he said finally. Then we do not let it get to court. We find another way. What other way? Zelda asked. They will keep looking until they find me. And when they do, you will be charged with harboring a fugitive. You will lose everything you have built here. I will not let that happen, Daniel said. And there was such conviction in his voice that she almost believed him. You trusted me enough to stay here. Trust me enough to help you now. Zelda wanted to trust him, but trust had failed her too many times. Still, she had no other options, nowhere else to run. So she nodded, and Daniel began to plan. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Daniel sent his ranch hands, Tom and Wesley, into town with instructions to listen for gossip, to learn what they could about the men who had come to the ranch. He hid Zelda's horse in a remote pasture where it would not be easily found. He coached Zelda on a new identity, a story that would explain her presence if questions were asked. She would be his cousin from Missouri, come to help with the ranch after losing her husband to influenza. It was thin as paper and twice as fragile, but it was better than nothing. That night, Zelda could not sleep. She lay in her bed and listened to the night sounds of the ranch, knowing that each hour brought her closer to discovery, closer to the end of whatever brief peace she had found here. She thought about leaving anyway, saddling a horse in the dark and riding out before Daniel could stop her. But something held her there, some combination of exhaustion and hope, and the dangerous pull she felt toward the man in the next room. She must have finally dozed because she woke to find Daniel standing in her doorway, silhouetted by lamplight from the main room. Get dressed, he said quietly. We need to leave. Now. What happened? Zelda asked, already pulling on her boots. Tom and Wesley just got back from town. The bounty hunters are bringing the sheriff tomorrow morning, along with a judge from Denver. Marcus Richter himself is with them. They mean to search every building within 50 miles until they find you. Zelda's blood went cold. Marcus Richter. The man who had sworn to see her hang, who had the money and power to make it happen. If he was here, then there was no hope of hiding, no chance of talking her way out. Where can we go? She asked, grabbing her carpet bag. There is an old line shack about 10 miles into the mountains, Daniel said. It is on the edge of my property, past where most people ride. We can hole up there until this blows over. It will not blow over, Zelda said. But she followed him anyway, because staying meant certain capture. They left through the back door, moving quickly through the darkness toward the barn. Daniel had already saddled 2 horses and packed supplies. They mounted and rode out, heading into the foothills under a moon that was barely a sliver in the sky. The trail was rough and narrow, winding through pine forest and across rocky streams. Daniel led the way, navigating by memory and starlight, never hesitating even when the path seemed to disappear entirely. They reached the line shack as dawn was breaking, a small cabin built against a cliff face, half hidden by trees. It was more primitive than the main house, just one room with a fireplace, a bunk, and a table. But it was shelter, and more importantly, it was remote. Daniel unsaddled the horses and turned them into a small corral while Zelda inspected the cabin. There were supplies inside, canned goods and flour and coffee, enough to last a week or more, blankets stacked on the bunk, a stack of firewood by the hearth. Daniel had clearly used this place before, kept it stocked for emergencies. We will be safe here for a few days, Daniel said, coming through the door. But we cannot stay indefinitely. Eventually, someone will think to search this far out. Why are you doing this? Zelda asked, the question bursting out of her. You could turn me in, collect the reward. $500 is more money than most people see in a year. Daniel looked at her like she had said something incomprehensible. I do not want blood money, and I do not believe in hanging people for defending themselves. You do not even know me, Zelda said. For all you know, I am exactly what they say I am, a cold-blooded killer who murdered a man for money. Are you? Daniel asked. No, Zelda said. But how can you be sure? Because I see you, Daniel said simply. I see the way you care for the horses, the way you cook enough food for 3 people even though it is just the 2 of us. I see the nightmares that wake you up at night, the way you flinch when anyone moves too fast. You are not a killer. You are a survivor. There is a difference. Tears burned in Zelda's eyes, and she turned away so he would not see them. No one had ever seen her that way. As something more than her circumstances. Even before Samuel Richter, even when she was just a saloon girl trying to make enough money to eat, people had looked at her and seen only what they expected to see. But Daniel looked at her and saw a person worth saving. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer and she could feel his warmth at her back. You do not have to thank me for treating you like a human being. That is the bare minimum. She turned to face him and found him closer than she expected, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the small scar on his chin, the way his breath caught when she looked up at him. Something shifted between them, something that had been building since that first day in Loveland, an awareness, an attraction, a connection that went deeper than gratitude or circumstance. Zelda, Daniel said, and his voice was rough. I need you to know that I am not doing this because I expect anything from you. You do not owe me anything. I am helping you because it is the right thing to do, not because I want something in return. I know, Zelda said. And then because she was tired of running from things she wanted, tired of denying herself even the smallest comfort, she stood on her toes and kissed him. For a moment Daniel froze, and Zelda thought she had made a terrible mistake. But then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he was kissing her back with a desperation that matched her own. His lips were warm and firm, and he tasted like coffee and hope and all the things she had given up on ever having. She wound her fingers in his hair and held on, kissing him like he was air, and she had been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Daniel rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I have wanted to do that since I first saw you in town, he said, looking so lost and so fierce all at once. I have wanted to let you, Zelda admitted, but I did not think I had the right to want anything. You have every right, Daniel said fiercely, to want, to hope, to live without fear, and I will fight anyone who says different. They spent the day at the line shack, talking and laughing and stealing kisses when the mood struck them. It felt like a stolen moment outside of time, a pocket of peace in the middle of chaos. Daniel told her more about his life, about his dreams for the ranch, about the loneliness that had settled on him after Margaret's death. Zelda told him about her childhood in Kansas, about the father who left and the mother who drowned her sorrows in bottles, about the series of bad choices and worse luck that had led her to Denver and the Bluebird Saloon. I am not ashamed of the work I did, she said, but I'm tired of being judged for it, tired of people thinking they know who I am based on where I worked. Anyone who judges you for surviving is a fool, Daniel said. You did what you had to do. That takes strength, not shame. As night fell, they shared the narrow bunk, lying fully clothed but tangled together, taking comfort in closeness. Zelda fell asleep with her head on Daniel's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling safer than she had in years. She woke to the sound of horses and voices outside the cabin. Daniel was already moving, pulling on his boots and reaching for the rifle he had propped by the door. Zelda grabbed her gun and positioned herself by the window, peering through the gap in the shutters. 3 men sat on horses outside, and one of them was Sheriff Dalton from Loveland. The other 2 she did not recognize, but they had the hard look of men comfortable with violence. "Carter, we know you are in there. Come out and talk to me," Sheriff Dalton called. Daniel looked at Zelda, his expression grim. "Stay here. Let me handle this." "They will arrest you," Zelda said. "Maybe," Daniel agreed, "but they will not shoot me. Dalton knows me, knows I am not a violent man. Give me a chance to talk to him." Before Zelda could argue, Daniel opened the door and stepped outside, his hands visible and empty. Zelda pressed herself against the wall beside the window, her gun ready but out of sight. "Morning, Sheriff," Daniel said, his voice calm. "Bit early for social calls." "Cut the act, Carter," Dalton said, and he sounded more tired than angry. "We tracked you here. We know you are harboring Zelda Jennings. Marcus Richter is offering $1,000 now, and he has a judge willing to sign whatever papers are needed to search this cabin. Make this easy on everyone and bring her out." "I cannot do that," Daniel said. "Damn it, Daniel, I do not want to arrest you. But I will if you force my hand. You are a good man, but this woman is a killer. She does not deserve your protection." "She killed in self-defense," Daniel said. "Samuel Richter tried to murder her, and she fought back. That is not murder. That is survival." "That is for a court to decide," Dalton said. "Not you and not me. Now bring her out, or we are coming in." Zelda made her decision in that moment. She could not let Daniel be arrested because of her, could not let him lose everything he had built. She tucked her gun into her waistband and opened the door, stepping out into the early morning light. "I am here," she said. "Do not blame Daniel. He was trying to help someone who had nowhere else to go." Marcus Richter dismounted, and Zelda got her first clear look at the man who had been hunting her. He was older than she expected, probably in his 60s, with gray hair and a face carved from granite. His eyes were cold and empty, the eyes of a man who saw people as obstacles or tools, never as human beings. "Zelda Jennings," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like a curse. "You murdered my son." "Your son tried to kill me," Zelda said, lifting her chin. "I defended myself." "You are a whore and a liar," Richter said, "and you will hang for what you did." Daniel stepped between them, his body shielding Zelda. "If you want her, you go through me first." "Daniel, do not," Zelda said, grabbing his arm. "It is not worth it." "You are worth it," Daniel said, looking back at her. "You are worth fighting for." Sheriff Dalton dismounted and approached them, his hand resting on his gun. "Daniel, I am asking you as a friend to step aside. Do not make me arrest you too." "Then arrest me," Daniel said, "because I will not let you take her without a fight." The standoff held for a long, tense moment. Then Marcus Richter pulled a gun from his coat and pointed it at Daniel. "Move, or I will shoot you where you stand," he said. "You would murder a man in front of a sheriff?" Daniel asked. "That seems like a bad strategy." "My son is dead because of this woman," Richter said, his voice shaking with rage. "I will not let her walk away. I will not let anyone stand in the way of justice." "This is not justice, courtois," Daniel said. "This is revenge. And if you pull that trigger, you become exactly what you claim Zelda is, a murderer." For a moment, Zelda thought Richter would shoot anyway. His finger tightened on the trigger, his face contorting with fury. But Sheriff Dalton stepped forward and placed his hand on Richter's arm. "Put the gun down, Marcus," he said quietly. "This is not the way." "He is protecting a killer," Richter shouted, "and you are threatening to become one yourself, Mir," Dalton said. "Put the gun down." Slowly, reluctantly, Richter lowered the weapon, but his eyes never left Zelda, and the hatred in them was like a physical force. "Fine," he said. "We will do this the legal way. Sheriff, arrest them both. Carter for harboring a fugitive, and Jennings for murder." Dalton looked like he wanted to argue, but he had a job to do. He approached Daniel and Zelda, pulling out handcuffs. "I am sorry, Daniel," he said. "I truly am, but you have given me no choice." "I know," Daniel said. "I would make the same decision again." They were cuffed and loaded onto horses, then led back down the mountain toward Loveland. The ride took hours, and by the time they reached town, word had spread. People lined the street, watching as the sheriff paraded them past. Some looked sympathetic, but most looked eager for scandal, for drama, for the entertainment of watching someone else's life fall apart. They were locked in separate cells in the small jail behind the sheriff's office. Daniel was in the cell across from Zelda, close enough that they could talk through the bars. I am sorry, Zelda said once they were alone. I should never have involved you in this. Stop apologizing, Daniel said. I made my choice. I would make it again. You are going to lose your ranch, Zelda said, everything you built. I will get it back, Daniel said, but I will not get you back if they hang you. So we focus on that first. Over the next 3 days, Daniel worked tirelessly from his cell. He called in every favor he had, contacted every person who owed him money or gratitude or friendship. He convinced Tom and Wesley to ride to Denver and track down the women who had worked with Zelda at the Bluebird Saloon to get statements about Samuel Richter's violence. He hired a lawyer, a young man named Franklin Mills, who had a reputation for taking on difficult cases and actually winning them. Zelda watched it all from her cell, equal parts grateful and terrified. She had never had anyone fight for her like this, never had anyone believe her story mattered. It was overwhelming and humbling and desperately frightening, because if they failed, Daniel would suffer right along with her. On the 4th day, Franklin Mills came to see her. He was younger than she expected, probably not much past 30, with sharp eyes and a serious expression. Miss Jennings, he said, sitting on the bench outside her cell, I have spoken with Daniel and I have reviewed the statements from the women at the Bluebird Saloon. I believe we have a solid case for self-defense. Marcus Richter has money and influence, Zelda said. What do I have? The truth, Mills said, and a growing number of people who believe you. Daniel Carter is well respected in this community. His willingness to risk everything to protect you has made people question the official story. Add to that the testimony from women who can attest to Samuel Richter's history of violence, and we have a real chance. What about Daniel? Zelda asked. What happens to him? If we can get you acquitted, the charges against Daniel will likely be dropped. Harboring a fugitive requires that the person being harbored actually be guilty of a crime. If you are found innocent, then he did nothing wrong. It was a thin hope, but it was hope nonetheless. Zelda clung to it like a lifeline as the days passed and the trial date approached. The trial was held in the small courtroom above the general store, the only space in Loveland large enough to accommodate the crowd. It seemed like the entire town had turned out, along with people from surrounding ranches and even some from Denver. Marcus Richter sat in the front row, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Daniel sat on the other side of the aisle, still in handcuffs but allowed to attend as a witness. The prosecution laid out their case first. They painted Zelda as a calculating woman who had lured Samuel Richter to her room with the intent to rob him, then murdered him when he resisted. They produced the gun she had used, the money found in her room, witnesses who testified that she had been seen talking to Richter earlier in the evening. Then it was Franklin Mills's turn. He called the women from the Bluebird Saloon one by one, and they told their stories. How Samuel Richter had beaten a girl named Annie so badly she lost the sight in one eye. How he had broken Sarah's ribs and thrown Eliza down a flight of stairs. How he came to the saloon looking for women to hurt. How he paid extra for the privilege of violence. He called a doctor who had treated Zelda after the shooting, who testified to the bruises on her throat, the marks on her arms, the signs of a struggle. He called Daniel to the stand, and Daniel described finding Zelda on the road, the fear in her eyes, the way she carried herself like someone who had been fighting for her life. And finally, Franklin Mills called Zelda herself. She walked to the stand on shaking legs, acutely aware of every eye in the room on her. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, then sat down and looked directly at the jury. Tell us what happened the night Samuel Richter died, Mills said gently. And Zelda told them. She told them about working at the Bluebird, about the men who came through looking for company or comfort or violence. She told them about Samuel Richter, how he had singled her out, how he had come to her room drunk and angry. She told them about the fear, the desperate fight for survival, the moment when she had pulled the trigger because it was either his life or hers. I did not want to kill him, she said, and her voice broke. I just wanted to live. Is that such a terrible thing? To want to survive? The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even Marcus Richter seemed stunned, his face pale and drawn. The prosecution cross-examined her, tried to poke holes in her story, to paint her as a liar and a manipulator. But Zelda had the truth on her side, and the truth held firm. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Zelda sat in her cell and tried not to think about the rope, about the drop, about what it would feel like to have her neck snap. She tried to focus on Daniel's face, on the promise in his eyes, on the future they might have if the jury saw what he saw. When they were finally called back to the courtroom, Zelda could barely walk. Her legs felt like water, and her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Daniel caught her eye from across the room and mouthed the words, "It will be all right." She wanted to believe him. The foreman of the jury stood, a paper in his trembling hand. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Zelda Jennings, not guilty of murder. We find that she acted in self-defense and is therefore not culpable for the death of Samuel Richter." The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered, others shouted in outrage. Marcus Richter surged to his feet, his face purple with rage, but the sheriff and his deputies held him back. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order, and finally the crowd settled. "Miss Jennings, you are free to go," the judge said. "The charges are dismissed. As for Daniel Carter, in light of Miss Jennings' acquittal, the charges of harboring a fugitive are also dismissed. Both of you are free." Zelda felt her knees give out, and she would have fallen if Franklin Mills had not caught her. She was free. Free. The word did not seem real, did not seem possible, but the handcuffs were being removed, and Daniel was crossing the courtroom toward her, and then she was in his arms, both of them holding on like they would never let go. "You are free," Daniel whispered against her hair. "You are free, and you are safe, and you are coming home with me." "Home," Zelda repeated, and the word felt like a prayer. They left the courtroom together, walking through the crowd with their heads high. Marcus Richter tried to approach them, tried to spit more venom and hate, but the sheriff intervened and escorted him away. Zelda did not spare him another glance. He had already taken too much of her life. She would not give him another moment. The ride back to the ranch felt like a dream. Daniel kept reaching over to touch her, to make sure she was real, and Zelda did the same. They had survived, against all odds, against money and power and the weight of the world's judgment. They had survived. When they finally reached the ranch, Daniel helped her down from her horse and pulled her into another embrace. "I love you," he said, the words bursting out of him. "I know it is too soon, and I know you might not feel the same, but I have to say it. I love you, Zelda Jennings. I think I have loved you since the moment you looked at me in town with those fierce green eyes and decided to trust me." Zelda felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in years they were tears of joy. "I love you too," she said. "I did not think I was capable of love anymore, but you proved me wrong. You gave me my life back. You gave me hope." Daniel kissed her then, deep and long and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "Marry me," Daniel said. "I know it is fast, but life is too short to waste time. Marry me, and we will build a life together, not because you owe me, but because we choose each other." "Yes," Zelda said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married a month later in the small church in Loveland. The same people who had watched her trial came to watch her wedding, but their expressions were different now. Sympathetic, supportive, even happy for her. Tom and Wesley stood as witnesses, along with 3 of the women from the Bluebird Saloon who had traveled from Denver to see Zelda happy. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Zelda wore a dress that one of the town women had sewn for her, pale blue with lace at the collar. Daniel wore his best suit, and when he looked at her, his eyes shone with love and pride. They exchanged vows in front of God and community, promising to love and honor each other through whatever life brought. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel kissed her to applause and cheers. Zelda felt like she was floating, like she had stepped into a life that belonged to someone else, but it was real. This was her life now. Her husband, her home, her future. The first year of marriage was not easy. Building a life together meant learning each other's rhythms, navigating conflicts and compromises, figuring out how to be partners rather than just two people in love. But they worked at it, and slowly, the ranch began to feel like Zelda's home rather than just Daniel's. She learned to manage the horses, to keep the books, to work alongside the ranch hands as an equal. She planted a garden and filled the house with flowers and baked bread every Sunday for the small community meals they started hosting. And through it all, Daniel loved her with a steadiness that never wavered. He loved her on the good days when everything went right, and he loved her on the hard days when her past came back in nightmares and panic. He loved her when she was strong and when she was vulnerable, when she was confident and when she doubted herself. He loved her without condition or reservation. And slowly, Zelda learned to believe she deserved that love. 2 years after they married, Zelda gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas Daniel Carter, after Daniel's father and the ranch hand who had helped save Zelda by riding to Denver for witness statements. The birth was long and difficult, but when Zelda finally held her son in her arms, she felt something shift inside her. This child was proof that she was more than her worst day, more than the sum of her sins. She was a mother, a wife, a woman building something good and lasting. 3 years later, a daughter joined them, Lucy Margaret Carter, named for Daniel's sister. Lucy had her father's blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she was fierce and fearless from the day she was born. Watching her children grow, seeing them run through the ranch that had become their home, Zelda felt a peace she had never thought possible. Life was not perfect. There were hard years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. There were conflicts with neighbors, storms that damaged buildings, horses that went lame at the worst times. But through it all, Zelda and Daniel faced everything together, their love deepening with each challenge they overcame. On their 10th anniversary, they sat on the porch as the sun set, watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was 9 now, tall and serious like his father. Lucy was 7, wild and laughing as she chased chickens around the yard. "Did you ever imagine this?" Zelda asked, leaning against Daniel's shoulder. "When you found me in town that day, did you think we would end up here?" "I imagined hoping you would stay," Daniel said, "but I did not dare imagine you would love me back. That felt too much like tempting fate." "I am glad you tempted it anyway," Zelda said. "I am glad you saw something in me worth saving." "You saved yourself," Daniel said. "I just gave you a place to land." "You gave me everything," Zelda corrected. "A home, a family, a life I never thought I deserved. You looked at me when the whole world said I was beyond redemption, and you said forgiveness had no limit." Daniel turned to face her, his eyes serious. "Because it does not. People make mistakes. They survive terrible things and do what they must to keep living. That does not make them irredeemable. It makes them human. And humans deserve second chances." Zelda kissed him, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 10 years of love and gratitude and partnership. "I would choose you again," she said. "In every life, in every world, I would choose you." "And I would choose you," Daniel said, "always." Their children ran up to the porch, demanding attention and snacks and stories before bed. Zelda laughed and stood, pulling Lucy onto her hip while Thomas grabbed Daniel's hand. They went inside together, a family complete and whole. That night, after the children were asleep, Zelda stood at the window of the bedroom she shared with Daniel and looked out at the ranch. The buildings she had helped repair, the gardens she had planted, the corrals where horses she had trained now grazed. This was her legacy now. Not the violence of her past, but the life she had built with her own hands and the love of a good man. She felt Daniel's arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far I have come," Zelda said. "How different my life could have been if you had not stopped to help a stranger with a lame horse." "It was never a choice," Daniel said. "From the moment I saw you, I knew you were meant to be in my life. Call it fate or luck or divine intervention. It does not matter. What matters is that you are here and you are mine, and I get to love you for the rest of my life." "The rest of our lives," Zelda corrected. "We are in this together." "Together," Daniel agreed, "until the very end." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing of their children. Thomas grew into a young man much like his father, steady and kind with a gift for working with horses. Lucy became a force of nature, beautiful and fierce and determined to make her own way in the world. They added 2 more children to their family, another son named James, and a daughter they called Rose. The ranch prospered. Daniel's reputation